Well, thank you. I think this is a very appointed time in history because, Doug, a lot of preachers, and Tom will probably say amen to this, have quoted Ephesians 6 with, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and spiritual wickedness in heavenly places, never giving a real thought to what that really means. And the importance of what Tom Horn has been writing about, has been preaching about, has been speaking about, and the things that we have paralleled each other's research and writings with are critical to this time and age, because if you look at all the biggest corporations in the world, what do they deal with? Information. What is the ultimate control mechanism right now that we're seeing played out in the headlines and in the censoring of Alex Jones, any conservative sites, me, others that are being, hammered incessantly? The thing is that knowledge is truly power, but there's a different type of knowledge. There's an arcane knowledge or an occult knowledge, a hidden knowledge, and then there's God's revelation. And so I think the subject matter, I know the subject matter that we're going to be dealing with at Branson, transhumanism and the hybrid age, could not be any more important at this point in history. It just simply can't. And God is very explicit when he states that his people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, because it's not that he doesn't warn them over and over and over. They reject it. So, the thing that's important is that when you're talking about singularity, and I'm going to turn it right over to you, Tom, after I run through, just this real quick point. The singular purpose of singularity is to destroy humanity that the living God created in his image and likeness. That's the real singularity. That's the real numero uno focus. And until people grasp that, then they can't understand the words of Jesus when he said, if the days weren't shortened for the elect's sake, there be no flesh left alive. And you can put in a parenthetical insert, not adding to the word of God or subtracting from it, but that which God has created has been under attack even prior to Noah's flood, after Noah's flood, and now we come to a deja vu of demonic feasting and articulating their hatred for mankind. So this thing is really important. So when we talk about singularity, we're talking about the end of mankind as you know it. We're talking about extinction at the hands of the singularists, or at the people that believe that basically mankind can achieve godhood apart from God. We're talking about a term I coined years ago, techno-serfdom, slavery. We're talking about Hugo de Garis, who will be, by the way, a speaker at Branson, what he called Gigawar and Gigadeath, World War III. Economic collapse, somebody once said, and I agree with him right now, you cannot understand the markets. You can only understand the manipulations. In other words, you can identify the manipulations, but the markets make no sense. Then you have the all-encompassing Big Brother AI. You've got the alienation and loss of humanity, and that's what we're going to hit tonight too, because of all things, our humanity, our love, the mercy God shows us, the mercy we show others, that's something that they cannot reproduce, the empathy. Environmental catastrophes, right. And then we've got the loss of our history, knowledge, and spatial resolution, which simply means how we fit in everything. And we've got the, if you will, the potential now to basically obliterate ourselves, fully cooperating with the technological jargon, not realizing the ramifications of that jargon. Hi, Tom. Nice to be on with you tonight.
Hey, Steve. Great to be on with you. And Joe and Doug Hagman, great to be on with you. And by the way, you mentioned my son Joe Artis having been on and how much we sound like each other. I had a lot of fun with that when he was young and dating girls, and they would call the house, and I would answer, and they would think that they was talking to him, because him and I do, actually. A lot of people say, we can't distinguish between the two of you when you're on the phone like that.
Oh,
but
man.
Anyway, he's a smart kid. I'm proud of him. He's really coming into his own now.
You know what? I would love to have been a fly on the wall when you were doing that, because Tom, from what I know of you, I mean, we've talked and we've met, and boy, that would just be downright fun. But
Yeah, it was fun. I was a stinker, and he asked me, Dad, please stop doing that. I was trying to get some secrets. Steve, your opening monologue is so true, and the last statement that you made clarifies the whole thing. If people were to say, well, wait a minute, I mean, you really honestly believe that everybody that's working towards the technological singularity seeks the destruction of humanity, but your last statement about it clarified it all. No, they're operating in ignorance. The vast majority of them don't have a clue what they're moving toward, but there is a spirit operating behind them, and we have a precedent for this because it happened once before when all flesh became corrupt upon the earth. And there are the original biotech scientists are today bound in everlasting chains of darkness waiting for the judgment of God because of what they did to his creation. And yet, now, here we are going right down this road. And I think you opened, Doug, by saying we're, 30 days away from the Transhumanist Conference in Branson, the hybrid age, something like that.
28 days, right. Yep.
28 days, and Steve clarified for me, because I was telling some people that contacted us today that the live attendance registration opportunity is sold out, and that if they want to attend, they're going to have to do that now by buying the live streaming. But are there still some tickets available?
I think, Tom, there were 30, and the reason why it's a little up in the, 30 out of, close to 3,000, so
right.
That puts it in perspective. But the deal is live streaming is really important for people to sign up for ahead of time, because we have to secure the bandwidth, and the Mansion, even because the Mansion, by the way, is the venue in Branson, Missouri, that's just a gorgeous place. They brought in special fiber optic lines for us this year because, quite candidly, there were so many people that wanted to get on, and unfortunately, I tell people this, so effectively as of tomorrow, there are no more tickets left. There may be a waiting list if you want some, because inevitably someone, will check out, but the safest way to make sure you get all the information is by signing up for the live streaming, and so that's critical at this point.
Yeah, so last year, I remember by the time I walked up to speak, one of the guys that was running the systems there that were monitoring the numbers of people that were watching around the world, we had something like 50 or 60 countries. We don't even know how many people were in each one of those countries. I don't. That were watching via live streaming. The building itself was packed. It only holds 2,800, and I think 3,000 people tried to sneak in. But, we had great security, and that's another thing. If there's 20 or 30 people want to buy those last tickets tonight to be at this conference, this was the largest conference, the largest prophecy-themed conference in the United States last year. It was the largest conference of any kind in Branson last year, according to the Chamber of Commerce. It's already sold out again, or will be by tonight. So if you want to attend, get those last few tickets, or better yet, sign up for the live streaming. And if you sign up for the live streaming, as I understand, you also get last year's live streaming. And this is a little bit important to me as of this week, because as you guys know, and this is not what we're going to talk about tonight, but as you know, the History Channel just broadcast this week a 2-hour so-called documentary called The Last Pope. They actually even took the same title as the WorldNet Daily feature that was based on me and Chris Putnam's work. Why am I bringing that up? Because if people are intrigued by that, because it's in the news now this week, if they buy the live streaming for this year's conference, they get all of last year free. And my presentation last year was 1.5 hours, walking people through how Chris Putnam and I came together, all of the just God things, the preternatural, supernatural events that took place that caused us to write the book, Petrus Romanus, all the way up to how we determined that Pope Benedict XVI, and in fact, there are YouTubes out there you can watch where Chris and I, we're on with Sid Roth, Jim Baker, Prophecy in the News, these different programs, and we predicted 1 year in advance that Pope Benedict XVI was going to retire, and we said we believed he was going to do that in April of 2000. 2012. We predicted that in 2011. 2012, as you know, came and went. It didn't appear the Pope had retired. But then, February 28th, 2013, the Vatican announces Pope Benedict has retired. He has resigned his office. He has stepped down. And that same day, their media outlet, the El Observatore Romano, gave an interview to the New York Times. And in that interview, they admitted that Pope Benedict actually, officially, secretly retired in April of 2012, the very month and year that we had predicted at least a year in advance. If people want to know how we were able to do that, they can get the live streaming to this year's conference. They will also get last year's conference, and they'll be able to watch the 1.5 hour, or whatever it was, over 1 hour presentation in which I walked through how all of that happened, the conclusions that we made, so, you know, just a bit of bonus information, because we've had quite a few people this week, actually, contacting us, even other media outlets wanting to interview us on the subject of Petrus Romanus, the final pope. And I've said, look, that was last year, the year before. I've moved past that. We're now focused on an upcoming conference here in the next month that's going to be on the hybrid age, and that's the important subject matter that we're talking about. But for those people that might be curious about it, in fact, Doug, I appreciate the write-up that you did for tonight's show, and you even mentioned that the History Channel had plagiarized our work. But you know what? I don't care. We've done what we've done. If people want to read the deep stuff, get the work that Chris Putnam and I did. It took us a year of research, and I think I don't hardly ever brag on anything that I do, but I felt when it was done that it really did set the bar for anything that had ever been written on that subject matter.
I agree, and I have to say I did pick that book up, and I read all the time, and that book, you know what, Tom, light years, you and the late Chris Putnam, light years ahead of your time, as has Steve Quayle been. I mean, folks, folks, the listeners and viewers of this program, you've got a front row seat to the future right now. And by the way, after Branson, I'm echoing now, or quoting Steve Quayle, after Branson, everything changes. So, but thank you, Tom, and thank you for your work, and Steve, thank you for your work. Okay, back to you, Steve.
Well, what's critical at this point, and I would say this, life-threatening, is the fact that we're now in a world where we're seeing the, if you will, the old gods, the ancient gods, the fallen angels. By the way, and I want to make something clear. When I talk about, I separate fallen angels, different than giants, different than demons. But when Jesus said the gates of hell are going to open, and his church, his body of true believers, that the gates of hell wouldn't prevail, that's because of God's protection on his people, which is going to be very important in these days coming. But quite candidly, when Jesus said, "Be ye not deceived," there is so much stuff coming at us that the only thing we can pray, and I know, Tom, this is Tom's prayer, my prayer, is that people, it clicks, you know. Like, again, you know, I love it when I'm told I'm always wrong. I've been wrong for 20 years. Well, when I wrote Genetic Armageddon 20 years ago, today's technology, tomorrow's monsters, well, now we're dealing with monsters with future technology. And again, when you see something in the future, it's hard to get people in the present to even acknowledge it, let alone deal with it. And so what the Branson is all about is bringing together specialists and guys who have written extensively. There's no, selectivity that why isn't this person there or why isn't that person there. It's because we really try and do this, Doug, and for the benefit of everybody around the world that will hear this broadcast, we focus in on what we believe is the critical mass and the critical issue. Now, I made a statement, Tom, I don't know if you heard it, about 2 weeks ago or maybe 3 weeks ago. I was up early in the morning. It seems like I'm always up early in the morning. I have just one clock. It's up, meaning, there is no nighttime, it seems, lately. But the point being is that I felt that I heard and I understood instantly. I felt the Lord said there is no separating the technological from the spiritual. And that hit me like a ton of bricks, because if we look at the destruction of the former age, if we look at that which I call pre-Adamic, others call it early earth, but I call it pre-Adamic, and the technology that's been involved, and even how Enoch was showing all the mysteries of the universe and how it all worked, then we can understand why the secret societies, even Francis Bacon, the 1500s, could talk about advanced technology. So I think it's important that people understand that when they talk about AI, artificial intelligence, when they talk about self-awareness or sentience, when they talk about, robots making moral choices, what they don't understand, or forgive me, they understand it, especially the occultists understand it, but the average person doesn't understand that this is their extinction playing out before their eyes. And it's not just a matter of taking their jobs, it's a matter of taking their lives, their future, and their grandchildren's future. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, look, just today, knowing that, we were going to be on with our friends, the Hagmans, and talking about this subject matter, I just clicked on the headlines to see what was out there, and the stories that popped up over at Google. One headline says, Pentagon looks to speed up third wave AI technologies. And, of course, the article, what it's dealing with is this new Cold War that we've entered into with Russia, but more importantly, China, and the intelligence agencies that have communicated both secretly, but some of this has also been made public knowledge, that Russia is ahead of us in some parts of AI technology, but China is way ahead of us, and that, in fact, they're so far ahead of us that if we don't spend a huge amount of money and effort and put a lot of brain power behind trying to catch up with where they are, literally within 1 year, within 12 months, they could knock the lights out here if they decide to, and we would have no defenses against it at all. And in that case, they're only talking about the grid, which our own government studies show could lead to something like 90% of the population in America dying as a result of the grid going down. But that's cyber warfare is only one part of AI technology. So that was one of the headlines. One of the other headlines, North Korean scientists attempting to clone humans. And that article, again, based off of American intelligence, that say that we know there are at least 2 advanced laboratories. And by the way, this only in North Korea. There are numerous other countries that are doing this too right now, but that are not only cloning, Snoopy the dog, but they're cloning humans. And some of these are not being destroyed at the embryonic level. I would suspect that's happening in the United States as well, according to some of the British research intelligence that we quoted last year on the same subject matter. One of the other headlines today, this is a real headline. The world needs bioengineered, ethical humans more than it needs geoengineering. That's a real article today. One of the other ones, I think, yesterday, U.S. government cannibalizing babies so that transgenic mice can live. That was a headline that was out there on a lot of websites. I also saw it on stevequill.com. And then finally, another headline today, I don't know if you saw this or not, Steve, but the headline is Faith, Technology, and the Future, Aubrey de Grey to keynote Christian Transhumanist Conference in Nashville. And these guys are rushing to get their conference in Nashville ahead of your conference by about 2 weeks. That'll be taking place in Branson. Of course, Aubrey de Grey, the immortalist, who is one of the leading figures working towards immortality without God. But this is the Christian. And this is a contradiction in terms, isn't it? The Christian Transhumanist Conference in Nashville. So, and if anybody listening to the show tonight went to Google right now or Yahoo News or any of those and just typed in the term transhumanism or transhumanist, you would see all kinds of headlines coming from every direction, and many of these from peer-reviewed science journals, from legitimate news sources, not just CNN. Illustrating that we have entered into the hybrid age. That's the reason for your title on your conference of the transhumanism and the hybrid age. That's actually a term that's being used now by different scientists. For people that are listening to this program, let me add something, and then I want to go to a program that you did just here, I don't know, 4 or 5 days ago, Steve, where you were talking about AI and its effort to identify and exterminate patriots. I want to ask you about that and talk about that a little bit, because I think it was very germane and very timely. People listening to this show that may not know this, there was also a Journal of Religion and Science feature in Zygon, which is a peer-reviewed, very well-respected journal of science and religion. Lots of different Bible scholarly type guys, read that and quote from it. But it featured a piece that was written by the professor of religion and philosophy at the University of London a while back, a guy by the name of S. Jonathan O'Donnell. The name of the article was called Secularizing Demons, Fundamentalist Navigations in Religion and Secularity. And in that article, his whole goal was to explore, at what he called a deeper level than his peers, the anti-transhumanist apocalypticisms of our day, the central voices behind which he identified as Tom Horn, Steve Quayle, people like the Hagmans. In fact, I was on the 2 other radio shows earlier today doing 2 programs with Larry Spargimino at Southwest Radio Church, and I reminded him that he too and Noah Hutchings were also listed as part of what they called the milieu, just a French term meaning a community. But we have literally been selectively identified as the leaders of the transhuman resistance. And so, my new book, The Milieu, Welcome to the Resistance, that's what I was pulling off of, was to say that, basically a gauntlet was thrown down because they recognize, as well as we do, that we have indeed entered into a period of time in which we are now in a catastrophic war for the minds of a generation. And right now, frankly, the church is losing that war. The fact that a Christian transhumanist conference is meeting in Nashville is only one of the telltale signs. The church is completely unengaged. I'm not talking about every church. I'm not talking about all Christians. But for the most part, the institutions of Christianity don't even know what we are talking about. And this is the biggest, most critical issue that is facing the world today.
Well, I think, too, Tom, that, I don't know how I run out of words, and you're much more eloquent and, let's just say this, more concise than I am in explaining some of this stuff. But, if something is so in your face, this will be my colloquialism for it, and so pertinent and so already in play, the fact that they would even have, quote-unquote, a Christian transhumanist conference, and it's not lost on me, and it certainly wasn't lost on you, Tom and Doug, and hopefully our listening audience, that they're doing their best to circumvent us, Doug. And when I say circumvent, they want to control the narrative, but unfortunately the living God is not going to allow that to happen. That's not just a faith issue, it's this: where were they 20 years ago, as well as our critics. So here's what's, I think, the point right now where we're at. As Tom writes, as I write, as others write, and look, I'm only talking about us, or other writers taking this on too. But as we talk about this, as we go forth with this, as we do interviews, interview after interview, what we're trying to do is give people credible evidence that an honest, seeking heart that really wants to know what's going on can do it. I remember Tom saying to people years ago, and I truly did, somebody said, "You always brag." No, I'm not bragging. I'm putting it into reference, historical. It's not bragging when you guys nailed the last pope and that the pope was going to step down. That's a matter of fact. But we've gone to the point now, we're at the point now that I know that when we take the topics that we take, or forgive me, obediently follow the leading of the Lord in transhumanism and the hybrid age, this is a big deal. The whole earth was corrupt. It caused the God of creation to literally wipe out everything and everyone, with the exception of Noah, who he and his family were the only pure genetic stock. And so now we're at a point in history where all that these men, it would be kind of like the equivalent of building the Babylonian ziggurat to the stars, and nothing now will keep them back except the salt of the earth to whoever will stand against it. Because Christianity, I'm talking it being transhumanism and singularity, because Christianity cannot embrace it. It is counter biblical. It is a denial of faith. And listen, faith plays an important part in this, because if you notice, Doug, Joe, and listening audience, there's two things that singularity and robotics and everything can never even talk about, and that is love, maybe three things: mercy and compassion. Now, I maintain that, the idea is simply this, that we're so far advanced in the future. Let me give you a hypothesis, Doug, and I'll ask you to respond, Tom, obviously, and Joe, if you want to. Let's say that human beings are already being cloned, lock, stock, and barrel, that their entire personality is being downloaded into, the brain that has been generated and pre-programmed to accept, your personality. How would you then deal with people that are, if you will, subservient to you, especially you had the power, you had pretty much all knowledge that's known in the universe at your fingertips. You had the ability, because of all the different technology, to, in essence, read the thought streams of human beings, because that's what NSA is doing right now, or even to program it. And then you were told, Tom, or Doug, or Joe, that you had to have your actual being killed in order to superimpose the new, if you will, the cloned being. Tom, you want to answer that first?
Well, my answer is going to be probably longer than Doug or Joe if they want to go first.
No, actually, I want to hear what you've got to say, because...
Well, we're talking about diminished empathy. You said a moment ago this really all comes down to love, mercy, compassion. These are distinctly human elements. Now, an animal can also have affection. A dog can love you and have affection, and to an extent feel empathy and things like that. But to rule over, this is something that is distinctly human, as we were created in the image of God and to be his imagers. And both, of course, Old and New Testament, the life of Christ, illustrates that the love of God, right? God so loved the world that he gave, and Jesus so loved the world that he followed. And he said, "And by this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, because you love one another." That's got to be at the forefront. Now, Steve, you were interviewed a few days ago, and I don't remember the title that was put up online, but it was on AI integration, how it'll be used to identify, vilify, basically,
nullify and destroy.
Yeah, and destroy patriots. And of course, for those that are paying attention, Alex Jones is the best example of this right now on how artificial intelligence systems, digital systems, are being used to vilify those that don't walk the party line, that don't obey the grand masters. You said a robot, would the robot kill its clone offspring? Well, we're already seeing what artificial intelligence systems and the grand masters will do. And this is key. In fact, we should talk about this a bit tonight, because there's a frightening trend right now that is supported by a growing body of literature that is connecting digital dependence to personality fragmentation, where you have cyber relationships over personal ones that our parents would have had a generation ago. And it's raising a kind of psychosocial, what would the term be, a divide that researchers see blossoming in antisocial trends And you're seeing it all over the place. You know, today people saying Donald Trump has divided the nation. Donald Trump didn't divide the nation. There have been a lot of powers at work for a while, but partly why people have been so dumbed down to just go out onto the streets and conduct, violence one against another is because we have diminished our ability to act with civility, to converse, to have differences of opinion, to be able to argue our points. I remember when I was a kid going to school, we would have debate classes. I don't know if they still do that anymore, but you had to learn how to make your most persuasive argument, but do it in a civil way. Look at what's happening to our nation today. We are literally coming apart. Part of this is political. Part of it is. Part of it are political figures that are inciting social division. That is definitely part of it. But a large part that nobody is talking about right now is how with the dawn of the Internet and the digital explosion, we have people paying more and more attention to iPads and cell phones and computer screens and all the rest of it than they are to each other, even when they're all sitting in the same room. I can't tell you, maybe I'm just an old fart, right? But how much it bugs me when I go to the airport or I go into a mall or anywhere else, and instead of seeing parents with their children conversing with each other, they're all sitting in a long line, and every one of them looking at a screen. And they don't realize that research shows that that situation is becoming an electronic pandemic by people escalating their detachment from traditional relationships while consuming 3 times as much digital information today as they did only 10 years ago, checking emails, texting, I think the most current statistics, texting 37 times an hour, spending 12 hours a day on average taking in e-media. And then you add to that phenomenon where we're going with this next step, partly why people need to be at the conference in Branson, because the next step is brain-machine interfacing. Some of that will be discussed and illustrated during the conference. This is literally one of the hottest emerging trends in the marketplace right now. Christmas toys coming out where kids, can play games by wearing caps on their head that's extracranially reading the impulses of their brain waves and translating that into being able to control systems. Now, all of that is multiplying a divide between human-to-human relationships. That was going to be my point. Versus human-machine integration. And substantial concern, I think, right now should be raised around, one, how brain-machine interfacing is naturally going to exacerbate the decline of the family unit and interpersonal relationships upon which society has historically depended. It is the foundation of a civil society. Secondly, the increase, and Steve, this is where it gets back to some of the other aspects of robots, the euphoric cybernetic addiction that's going to multiply as different cerebral stimulation of the brain's pleasure centers are added to existing neural senses. Right now we think of our neural senses, sight, hearing, taste, smell, touch, but scientists are saying that the virtual reality systems of tomorrow, including sex robots and all that, and virtual porn and all of that, is going to create a literal epidemic of people that are opening their mind. You and I understand this. They are opening their mind. They're opening their brain, a gateway not just to digital and erotic stimulation, but to supernaturalism. This is what our good friend Chuck Missler talks so much about in the last few years of his life. The danger that when you hook your brain up to machine systems, it isn't just a one-way teleportation device where you're sending your thoughts through into a cloud and giving command to computer systems, but you've opened a doorway that is a two-way lane, and other things, entities, influences, whatever, could jack into your brain, therefore into your soul, into your spirit, and affect you as well. So to me, we can keep talking about this if you want, but I think this is one of the most dangerous things. And frankly, the frightening part about this is it appears that it's entirely unavoidable for the most of society right now. The loss of individuality to a digital age, to a digital system. We're losing our anonymity, our privacy. We're giving up our free will as a result of cybernetic integration. And so I think we're facing significant ethical and social dangers right now. Industry, government interests, they're racing forward into the technological dream of post-humanism, not just transhumanism, but post-humanism. And there is a migration toward the fulfillment of biologically and cybernetically modified humans that are going to be combined with corporate national investments. What did the great thinker that wrote about the end of mankind, what did he call it? The creators, or whatever he called them. These are the people that are, as they are with Alex Jones right now, determining who will or won't, right, get to be in the public forum. They are the digital Gestapos of today. And by the way, the reach of this is far more than just who's going to get to be on Twitter. People, everybody's wearing these exercising digital armbands right now. What do they call those? Where it keeps your heart rate and your things like Fitbit. Well, imagine though tomorrow when you're wearing your Fitbit and that data that is monitoring how you're taking care of your health is used to determine whether or not you're going to get to have health coverage. Because if you won't take care of yourself, why should you be a burden on society? So we are giving up all of the great liberties that were codified in the Bill of Rights and the U.S. Constitution based on inalienable rights that were given to us by God, and we are losing all of that. And by the way, he might have been crazy, but Ted Kaczynski knew what he was talking about when he wrote his thesis, The Unabomber. When he wrote his thesis, and he said, little by little, we are giving ourselves over to a digital slavery. And that was the whole point that he wanted to make. Now, he's a nut. He's insane. But much of what he wrote about in his thesis was absolutely true. It is the road we're going down, and he foresaw it.
Yeah, and if I can jump in real quick, how many people remember John Roberts' confirmation hearing? I believe it was in 2009, where Joe Biden asked Roberts that he was going to make legal rulings where the integration of humans and microchip implants would be something that he would be ruling on, and that would be that would happen in his lifetime. And Tom, you mentioned the brain-machine interface. One of the things that's always fascinated me about this is how the constant demonstrations show that the whatever it is that connects between the circuit boards and the brain tissue, that they merge and work together without any outside operating forces, which is very telling as far as where our society is heading. And they already have the plans rolled out or in law for these medical purposes, doing just that.
Absolutely. Well, look, I mean, think of it. Your brain is just electrical activity. The synaptic firings in the brain are something that can absolutely be, well, the reason why we're making prosthetics right now, or a soldier who loses an arm, and by the way, Steve Quayle, me, the Hagmans, for anybody that's listening, we are not against therapeutic technology. That is not part of our anti-transhuman agenda, where devices can be made that could motorize wheelchairs or give people the ability to speak. I mean, we are for this kind of technology. But the only reason why DARPA right now has been able to roll out both exoskeletons, but also artificial limbs, hands, robotic hands, that kind of thing, where people can control that wearing a rubber cap on the top of their head, is because we have written the algorithms that know how now to translate the neuron pulses of the brain and to translate that into strings of zeros and ones, digital code, where it's then transmitted digitally into a receiver, and it is there then put back into comprehensive language that can tell the fingers, I'm moving my fingers, or I'm moving my hand, or I'm raising my arm. So we're already well beyond the ability of being able to brain-machine interface. We already know how to do that. And you're absolutely right. I forgot about that. And I forget exactly what the senator's name was, but he said, you mark my words, in my lifetime, we will rule on whether or not microchipping of humans will become mandatory. And now, fast forward to our present day and look at the strong cultural forces that are compelling all individuals to get plugged in to the grid, right? To be plugged in to the cloud, into the system. And soon, in the near future, we know that whoever resists is going to be left behind as inferior Luddites, which I've been accused of being, somebody that opposes technology, or worse, considered enemies of the collective's progress, i.e. Alex Jones, and like the former counterterrorism czar Richard Clarke in his book Breakpoint some years ago, depicted that those who refuse technological enhancements will be defined as terrorists. So they won't only be closed out of the public forum, as we're seeing an effort right now, they will be jailed or put to death. And of course, this totally smacks of the coming of Antichrist and the kind of persecution that the church is going to face. That is why I believe with all of my heart that the church should be at the forefront now of this conversation. They should be engaged. Churches should be buying Steve Quayle's books, getting material, writing 13-week courses, and teaching their people, their laity, what is happening within our world, and get involved in both the philosophical and theological discussion. If the church doesn't get involved, that old saying, if righteous men do nothing, right?
Right. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing.
Right.
That's kind of it. I'm sorry.
You said it better than I did.
Yeah. Yep, here's the thing that's really critical. I maintain that if you look at, first of all, most people forget this, okay, just a little history of Apple. The first Apple computer came, I think it was $666, okay? The Apple with the bite out of it obviously is symbolic of Eden. The iMac, the iPad, the iPhone, the iThis, the iThat, and maybe I'm leaving out some I's, but what's happened is I maintain, Tom, that the virtual world was designed as the ultimate honeypot. A honeypot in spy talk is that which can basically deceive the most seasoned spy into giving up secrets. Well, in this case, what's happened is people are surrendering their free will, they're surrendering their God-given identity to take up an avatar or to become an avatar and then enter into a totally unreal world where they have been, quote-unquote, the great divorce has been taking place. So the failure to not only communicate, I've seen, it makes me nuts too, Tom. I guess, I'm not, quote-unquote, hip, and I guess I'm still, but even my grandkids say, man, you're a cool grandpa. But the point that I'm trying to make in this thing is that we're already absorbed into the Borg. And I used a term years ago, Doug, 25 years ago on talk radio. I said they're turning us into a bunch of techno-serfs, and I called it the kingdom of techno-serfdom until they will no longer need us. The thing that's problematic right now is the sexual, and there is now, you forget Masters and Johnson, basically it's Tobor and Gort, two famous robots in history. The idea is this, to do away with human sexuality, and you can go into a neural stimulation of the pleasure center of the brain with a robot, and what they're going to do is that is a form, if people don't get it yet, that's a form of not only birth control, but it's the end of the human genome. And so when they're creating taking human DNA and human sperm and female eggs and combining them, and they're doing it outside of the womb, and they're doing it in all the hidden and secret laboratories, and then taking animal DNA and stuff. I want people to understand something. After reading everything I've done, researching everything I've done, I'm just scratching the surface, pun intended. The point is that the great if you will, the great heinous crime against the living God, even prior to the creation of Adam and Eve, was when the entities started creating and genetically altering. This is why people say, well, where did the dinosaurs come from? I said, well, just as God made Adam and Eve in his image, that Satan, because of the ugliness of his fall, could only produce that which was, if you will, a direct reflection of him. So the thing is that we are in a great divorce right now, and mind control and the MK Ultra programs, everything, people don't understand. And I made the statement, Tom, and I couldn't be more serious than this. 5G becomes mandatory. I'm off the internet, and I will personally see that whoever's on the internet watches me blow up my iMac, whatever 27-inch deal right now, because here's the thing. The net, we're going to be so, I tell people, imagine you've got a space helmet, and everything in that helmet is programming you, lying you, stealing your original thoughts, putting in manufactured thoughts, stealing your feelings. And we have now a bunch of snowflakes, sandbox critters that are living at mommy and daddy's house, and, they go out and protest, the ones that do, and then they've got nothing more to do than the stimulus to go back and get on the video games. Now, this is simplistic, I understand, and go into an unreal world. They have been divorced, and that's why the Chinese are leading the world. That's why the Russians, American kids are, trying to figure out if they're a boy or the girl. You've got Russian kids, the young wolves, where we used to have Boy Scouts learning how to strip an AK-47 blindfolded in less than, I think, 10 seconds, 15 seconds. You have the Chinese practicing now. I just put it up on my website for a hypersonic attack, aircraft that go 3,100 miles per hour. We have stuff like that too. But I think the most telling and compelling thing that we've got to get across to people, you need to have the information that's going to be presented at Branson. We do have Hugo de Garis, that is a brilliant, one of the top, if you will, synthetic brain guys in the world. And listen to this, Tom. I didn't know this. Maybe you did. But there are more synapses in a human brain than there are stars in the galaxy. The brain is the most complex object we know of, and understanding its connections at this level is a major step forward. Talking about what are called connectomes, CONNECTOMES. People need to look at it. In the Singularity Hub, it's called Amazing New Brain Map of Every Synapse. Every synapse points to the roots of thinking. So I maintain that that's already done. That's already a feat accomplished. They've already done it. So then how should we then, to answer the question of Francis Schaeffer, how should we then live? We cannot live in a vacuum of ignorance. We cannot live in a vacuum of indifference or apathy. We cannot live in denial or in the mode where, well, hey, I'm 70, I'm going to die, and then it's my kid's problem. What a self-centered, stupid, dumbass, anti-heritage mindset is that? And I hear people, Tom, I don't know if you do, you probably hang around different people than I do, but they say, well, hey, I'm old, that's my kid's problem. So where we're at right now is, and this is something I think people have got to understand, when God tells us in Ephesians to put on the helmet of salvation, there's a reason for that, because our brain is a battlefield before our hands carry out the fight with whatever weapons are before us. Let me make that clear. The brain is the pre-battlefield, maybe I should put the word pre in front of it, before the hands take the weapons to carry it out in real life. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, absolutely, and the whole point is that you mentioned a moment ago, a few years ago, I forget what the term was, it's kind of a pre-Borg term, where we're going to become the Borg, but you used a different phrase around it. In any case, that's what's being built right now. That was the whole point that I was making earlier, is that this is not futuristic. It's not Star Trek. It's not something far off into the future. In fact, some of the people that have written for the government's own Council on Bioethics, they wrote a paper called Human Dignity in the Biotech Century, and they made some of the strongest, most persuasive arguments, and very simplistic stuff, too. They talk about the pressure is already here. Imagine most young people today trying to function if you took away from them all of their digital apparatus, knowing how to read a map instead of using a GPS device, not being able to text, not being able to use email, not being able to use digital. This constitutes a huge part of their lives now, and it's so far wireless, but it is an integration into their capacity to think, their capacity to reason. Neuroscientists right now are writing substantial peer-reviewed papers on how we are entering into a very dangerous period of time in which young people, millennials, don't even have the capacity to think anymore. In fact, I can't think of her name. She's on kind of a book tour right now, and she is a clinical psychologist who has taught at the university level, but she's out there doing media right now, and she's saying that young people that are inside of our universities don't have the basic capacity to even be able to think. We're just passing them. We're giving them passing grades or whatever, but we're allowing them to sit there and write the answers to their tests down by looking it up on Google and finding out what the answer is and writing it down. They don't have the capacity to think. And she said the dangerous part is we're not saying that they're dumb. What we're saying is they have unlearned how to think, how to process information, how to study, learn, allow the brain that God created to digitally store and recall information, and then how to make philosophical arguments in favor of a particular worldview. Instead, they're just getting talking points from crazy politicians that are telling them to go out and curse at people if they're having dinner at a local cafe that might not agree with their particular political leanings. They don't even know why they're barking up a tree. They're just doing it. They're becoming automatons, and she's saying that this is a very, very dangerous moment. And even if she doesn't, by the way, she doesn't speak to this issue like a theologian or like a pastor. She's not talking about it from a church world or biblical worldview. She's talking about it as a sustainable social and cultural phenomenon that we are Rome getting ready to burn because people don't have a clue why we believe what we believe. Why would the majority right now of Democrats, according to all the most recent polling, why would they favor socialism over capitalism? It's because they don't even know how we got here. They don't know how they can demand free education and free health care and free this and free that and all kinds of assistance and everything. They don't even know how it works. They don't even know how capitalism made this the most powerful nation in the history of the world. And so, frankly, what's that other axiom? Those who have forgotten the mistakes of the past are doomed to repeat them. So that's what I'm saying. We've entered critical mass, and the guys that wrote for some of the government studies on this in Human Dignity in the Biotech Century, they say that that pressure right now to continue moving into an easy, breezy, technologically enhanced era in which some benevolent AI is going to take care of all of this for you. You won't even know. You don't need to know how to think, frankly. All you got to do is you got to know what button to push or to speak into your phone, and don't use Ebonics because it isn't going to understand what you're talking about. But figure out some way to text it in or type it in, and it's going to give you the answer. So you don't need to know how to think. And they too, writing for the U.S. government, are saying we have entered a critical stage now. All across our nation, people in every social strata, in the middle class, law, engineering, finance, professional fields, the military, regardless of their personal or religious views, are being sucked into a digital vacuum. Well, you and I think, us and the Hagmans and some of the people listening to this show, we know where this is going. And they had power to give life unto the image of the beast. We are racing towards technological singularity, a moment in time beyond which all of the rules no longer apply. You know, the technological singularity is taken from the cosmological terminology, singularity, which is talking about a black hole. And when you reach the event horizon, beyond the event horizon, the laws of physics as we understand them no longer apply. So in technological singularity, what they're saying is we are racing toward a moment in time after which an AI is going to gain consciousness. And Hugo de Garis, who's going to be at our conference here in 30 days, wrote the book on this, and he's qualified to talk about it. He was 20-some years the leader of the artificial brain development for Zion University out of China. So the Chinese right now, who are ahead of us in technological or in artificial intelligence development, got some of their, maybe we'll have to blame Hugo for this when he gets here in the U.S., maybe. But they gained knowledge from his research. And the Human Dignity in the Biotech Century, let me just read this quick quote here, and I'll quit because I know we got to go to a break. They say this, they say, consider whether the military, after investing billions in the development of technologies to create the cyborg systems, are going to allow individual soldiers that don't want to be cyborgs is what they're talking about, individual soldiers to decline the enhancements because of religious or personal qualms. It is not likely. Individuals may indeed dissent and decline technological augmentation, but such dissenters will find job options increasingly scarce because the network of cyborgs will require increasing levels of cooperation and harmonious coordination to further improve efficiency. The prosthesis will continue to introduce means of controlling or modulating emotion to promote those values. Meanwhile, the network will be increasingly controlled by central planning structures to facilitate harmony and efficiency. While everyone still considers themselves fully autonomous, in reality, behavior is more and more tightly controlled. Each step will move those who are cybernetically augmented toward becoming like the Borg, the race of cybernetic organisms that inhabit the 26th century of the Star Trek mythology. The Borg, once fully human, become assimilated by the greater collective mind, losing individuality for the good of the whole. I couldn't have said it better myself, and it's what we're talking about tonight. It's why people need to be at this conference. They need to hear the global experts in this area. Bring us up to today, bring us up to speed, tell us what it is we're facing, and tell those members of the church that are willing to get engaged why they must, they need, they have to now get involved in this discussion.
Okay.
It's not. I'll answer, Tom, and then if you can, feel free to. No, it's all working. It's evil. And this is a true statement. When Jesus made the statement, the whole world lies in the evil one, I would ask everyone listening to this, even those who don't like God, don't want to hear about Jesus, tell me something that doesn't. It is a tapestry of evil. And what we're seeing, you use the word confusion. That's exactly what took place at Babylon. But this is a purposeful confusion, Doug, that's being woven and laid out before humanity to, number one, cause them a total disruption in their pattern behavior and insert a new paradigm that disrupts everything they have known as normal, everything they have known as history, the peace they have known, the ability to come to grips with what they've known. You know, everything is, pun intended now, it's up for grabs, and the guy who's wanting to grab it all is the devil, because the whole earth was corrupt. And what's interesting is I called, and Tom, I don't know if you know this, I called a term term years ago, technological Babylon, Technolon, because it almost sounds like Teflon. It's going to be so slippery that most people won't be able to get a grasp on it until they're totally consumed by it. And I think we got a hit tonight, too, the idea it is anti-biblical, it is anti-God, it is anti-creation to believe and to even buy into Christian transhumanism, because you're saying the same thing the devil. God didn't do a good enough job making mankind. Now watch what I'm doing. So in other words, Doug, they're going to provide inserts, okay? The insertion of a creation, not of God's making, but it's that, and Tom, you use that in the scripture all the time in explaining Jude, that the fallen angels inserted themselves into the seed of mankind. So right now, Doug, it's take away the first. See, that's something that most people don't understand. The New World Order is not new at all. It's the old world occult, world of mysticism and monsters, control and perversion. And the reason why sex is such a big deal, and I tell people this, they've got to understand the alien agenda and how it will play in, because when you deal with alien abductions, quite candidly, they're not coming down to play bridge with humans. They're coming down to mess around with the human reproductive tract, the different fluids, the different hormones, et cetera, et cetera. I believe they have perfected that, probably 100 years ago, maybe at least 50 years ago. And now what we're going to see is okay, here you go, Tom, Homo perverticus, okay? Homo perverticus isn't just, sexual perversion. It's going to be the mankind, okay? Homo sapiens that were created one way in God's image and likeness, totally perverted into a blob, into if you will, a molecular consortium of proteins, protoplasm, and a lot of mixture to come up with this amorphous goo of the greater good. And the people that are pulling the strings, look, we're seeing this happening right now, Doug. It is not amorphous. It is not, forgive me, it is not disintegrated. It's not serendipitous. It's all by design. I want to make this statement. I'll turn it right over to Tom. They who will kill the First Amendment will kill you. They who will take away your free speech will take away your life. That's why, Tom, I came up, that was on Greg Hunter's interview. I said, identify, vilify, nullify, destroy. That's a formula that I started talking about 25 years ago on talk radio. And now you've got the vilification of Alex and all of us. You've got the technocrats, and this is why I want to say something. I'll be presenting at Branson the spiritual aspect of technology. You can't even go into modern rocketry space travel through Dr. Wernher von Braun, former SS, who actually became a Christian, Hermann Oberth, those guys and their testimony, the Nazi war machine, the Nazi genius. You cannot separate it from the mathematical dictates of, if you will, evil spirits being born out of a woman's birth canal in a protoplasmic form. By the way, this is all detailed in my book, Empire Beneath the Ice, and you cannot separate it even with CERN. And CERN and all of the occult ceremonies taking place in Europe. Europe is outside of a move of God. Europe is gone. It's done. It's over. It's finished. That doesn't mean there aren't Christians there, but outside of a move of God. And I think it's really important, Doug, that you understand and that everyone understand this is part of the end time plan. And Jesus said, men's hearts will fail them for fear of looking after those things coming upon the earth. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, and by the way, guys, I might get cut off here at any moment. We're having a big Missouri thunderstorm and lightning, and my power just went off and came back on. I'm kind of surprised that I'm not cut off already. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, and we can hear the clicking and the electrical interference, but you're okay.
Yeah, that's the electrical interference with the lightning and stuff. But anyway, what Steve said is absolutely true. Doug, your query into this is central really to the topic. Amorphous individuals, gender dysphoria. Whoa, did you hear that?
I felt it.
Yeah. All of this there's a reason why it's connected to all of the mythology, where you see the half man, half female. But notice that it's also connected to transgenic creations too. So this is part of the past. It was part of what the Watchers did the first time when they came along to corrupt the gene pool. It doesn't just involve DNA and genetics. It involves, the gender of the individual. And look at what's happening in our old line Christian institutions today, where they want to remove the term father, from their prayer manuals and take it out of the Bible and all the rest of that. So there has been this war from the very beginning on the ideal of male and female, gender differences, genetics, and then not just among the mankind, but among the species. Now, not only did this happen once before, but it's also prophesied for the end times. Not only did Jesus say, as it was in the days of Noah, in Luke, he says, as it was in the days of Lot. And we know what was happening at Sodom and Gomorrah, the same kind of morphological genderism attempts. All of this connected to the ideas of gender and how God made both male and female, made he them. Now, when you add to that, what we'll also be discussing, I believe, at Transhumanism in the Hybrid Age in Branson, and this is some of the part that gets to be very dangerous, and we're doing it, by the way, right now all over the world, is the idea that we are creating transgenic organisms, where we're taking the genetic structure of one species and altering it by the transfer of genes from another species. This was back in the news again this week. In fact, the very reason why the Food and Drug Administration in the United States is soliciting a harvest of aborted babies through Planned Parenthood. This is real. They're publishing this on the government's webpage. They need to get a harvest of these babies because they want to create transgenic mice, other transgenic animals.
Chimera, what they call a chimera?
Well, yeah, I mean, in ancient times, a chimera, right? So you had a mixture of between a snake and a lion and all these different things that come together. And by the way, in history and mythology, a chimera was an omen of evil. In other words, it was used to depict that something very bad had once happened before, could be repeated again. So it's ironic that today, all of these laboratories that are doing all this research into human-animal chimeras actually use that term, a chimera. But, I mean, again, many of the listeners might be astonished to learn that in spite of the unknowns about transgenic creation, and there are a huge number of unknowns, given that molecular biologists classify the functions of genes within their native species, but they're unsure in really most cases how a gene's coding might react from one species to another. That not only could the genetic structure of a modified animal and its offspring be changed in physical appearance as a result of transgenics, but its evolutionary properties, its development, its sensory modalities, its disease propensities, not just behavior, personality. Those kind of traits could be modified too. In fact, there's a professor out of Montreal, Canada, by the name of Ivan Balaban, that did some fairly famous research on this, in which he took the developing embryos of chickens, and then he took the unborn embryos of quail, and he took the genetic material from the quail and engineered it into the chickens. And when the chickens were born, the chickens began to grow, and they developed head bobs and vocal trills that are indicative of quail. And what his experiments illustrated was that very, very complex behavior patterns can be transferred across species barriers, across species lines. So this, again, Book of Enoch. In fact, am I still on?
Yes,
Can you hear me?
Yeah. I'm sorry for that delay. Yes, you're fine.
Sorry, there's so much thunder and lightning. I don't know if I'm still here.
Yeah, we hear it.
And I hope the lightning doesn't come through and pierce my eardrum. But is that possible, by the way? I've heard you shouldn't be on the phone.
Not a cordless
I don't know.
Yeah, not a cordless.
Yeah, you're okay.
Hey, Tom, I don't think so, except when the NSA is zapping your computer.
Well, the NSA, yeah, they've done that to me and you a lot. Look, we're running a special right now. I always do this when I'm on Hagmann. This seems like a convenient time if I can.
Sure.
We've got a special going on at skywatchtv.com right now. It's actually the biggest giveaway of the year, and it's called the Gods of War Collection, and it's all about the history behind everything we're talking about tonight, but also the future and even the Cold War. And if you haven't had Colonel McGinnis on the program yet with his new book, Alliance of Evil, wow, you should talk to him. This is the best thing he's ever written, and he's been on Fox News almost every night for the last week because everybody is very enthralled with what he's doing, what he's saying. But anyway, we're giving his book away free. We're giving Carl Gallup's new book away free. Derek Gilbert just wrote the sequel to his last bestseller, in which he is uncovering stones you can't believe related to the history of the Titans, the history of the Watchers, what was going on, not just Mount Hermon, but all throughout the ancient Middle East. He just returned, by the way, Steve, with his trip with Timothy Alberino into Sardinia. They went to the area of the giants. They're looking at the megalithic structures. This is all very related to all the research that Steve Quayle and Gen 6 has done. But anyway, he produced a documentary film. We're giving that away free. There's another documentary called The Gods of War. We're giving that away free. It's a huge thing. So basically, you go over there, you buy Derek's book, you get $220 in documentary films and other brand new books. They just literally got shipped to the warehouses this week. Amazon doesn't even show them available yet, so they're brand new. But you get all that stuff free. But like I always do with the Hagmann Show, if you go to skywatchtv.com, you can check out the commercial ad over there. You can click on it and go into the store, read the summaries of all that stuff. If you get that package, and on checking out from the store, if you will type in, I heard you on Hagmann. I just now made this up. The ladies in the warehouse are going to shoot me. But if you say, I heard you on Hagmann, I'll do two things. I'm going to have them add to that giveaway the hardback version of the Book of Enoch, and then I'm also going to have them give to you, it's a 20-hour audio series that retails for $35. It's all on this subject matter. And by the way, there's a large part of this that's also on aliens. What are they? Are they connected to the days of Noah, the Watchers? This is the repeat of that same phenomenon. But it's me, it's Chuck Misler, Gary Stearman's in there. I also interviewed some people that are not Christians, but they do research in this area, including Nick Pope, the former head of the Military of Defense Department on the study of UFOs for the government of Britain. Stanton Friedman, his last interview, because you know he's retiring now, but the original civilian investigator of what happened in Roswell, he allowed me to interview him. Get this, Jesse Marcel Jr.'s last interview, the only guy that the U.S. government admits actually handled the debris from Roswell. Him and I were friends, but I interviewed him. Anyway, it's 20 hours, $35. I'm going to give it to you for free, and I'm going to tell them to also throw in the hardback Book of Enoch together with everything else you'll see over there. So it's going to be something like $300 worth of stuff if you buy, and you're going to want to get Derek's new book anyway. In fact, by the way, not just because Derek is the host of the television program of which I'm CEO, Skywatch TV, but I have to say that his research, I think Steve would agree with me, his research it is some of the best, most cutting-edge, freshest. I mean, what Derek doesn't do is he doesn't rehearse pablum that you've heard 1,000 times over. It is the most comprehensive, fresh stuff in the world. And when I told him several times lately, I said, your research, your material is the best stuff I have ever read on this subject matter, and I'm very sincere when I tell him that Steve's going to, Derek is going to be interviewing Steve at the conference this year, and do we want to go back to that, Steve? I kind of got on a roll there about this big giveaway.
Yep. No, I think the big giveaway is really critical, because what we're trying to do, ladies and gentlemen, both Tom and I are almost in the same age group, but what we want to do is give enough material to take those that come after us, or those that are alongside of us at this point, to give them the information. And I agree. So what Tom has just spoken or addressed is the fact that Derek is going to interview me. I'm on in the afternoon on Saturday for, I think, a couple hours, and I'm going to give Derek because I think, and this may sound a little strange to some people, but I think that Derek is one of the best interviewers outside of Tom, and I say this not out of flattery, but out of total respect and admiration. Derek's probably the best guy that I know that can interview me, because I don't have to go back and build all the bases with him and for him. He is a primary investigator. He is a tremendous researcher, and he understands, obviously he may not agree with everything, nor I him, but he understands, having read most of my stuff and interviewed me, I think this is going to be the ideal forum for me to basically not have to watch the monitor and get shifted on time or anything, but to be able to answer questions and be able to share what I believe is going to happen. And by the way, Tom, the people that are feeding back to me the information on the new DVD I produced called the Forbidden History Revealed, the Egyptian Presence in the Americas and the Pacific Rim, the Great Smithsonian Cover-Up. If people will understand that the purpose of all of the expeditions for all this ancient DNA and technology is to weaponize it, they will get a better hand on it. And we had a guy come forth who is in this. We had to blur his face. We had to, and he specifically was taken to the secret warehouse of Smithsonian. Now, this is huge, and some people just yawn. Everything you know about American history is wrong. Everything. Because the Egyptians were in the Grand Canyon up in the Ohio River Valley in 235 to 250 BC, and with giant skeletons, and he was shown in the Smithsonian, the secret warehouse out of D.C., 100 yards long, 100 yards annexes, 4 levels deep, just kind of like the Raiders of the Lost Ark. He saw the Egyptian artifacts from the Grand Canyon. He saw the giant skeleton bones from the Grand Canyon. He was told there are 21-foot skeletons in there. He saw the gold, different gods of the Egyptians, and I've maintained over and over and over, it was the Egyptians that basically kept the true history of the pre-Adamic world alive, and that's why I call the Egyptian priesthood. This is probably one of the most important DVDs, and again, this is a separate, if you will, line of DVDs. The True Legends is primarily outside the country. The Forbidden History is inside the country, but I ask a question, and the answer is yes. Will the giants of yesterday become the super soldiers of tomorrow? Yes. Why are all the landforms of Grand Canyon named for Egyptian deities? Because of all the stuff that was found in there, and what's and then I go into the 21-foot giant that was captured alive in 1877, then broke loose, 21 feet tall, seen by 300 people, and the artist sketch of that is just astonishing. So the point is that I think that given what we're trying to bring to people, and ladies and gentlemen, the people that have bought this DVD, and I'm trying to get it uploaded to Vimeo. I've been kind of thwarted. You cannot upload to Vimeo until you have a trailer. The trailer guy that's been working on this has been having health issues, and Tim, by the way, has been in, that's not Tim, Tim's been in Peru on 2 expeditions to get all the footage for the next True Legends or, the next South American thing, but this is that important, Tom. So what I'm trying to get people to understand in this statement, your giveaway and in the video, and also my terminated book, I got to share with you, I cannot go beyond that right now because I can't, and I want to make this clear. Nobody can keep up with the moment-by-moment breakings of artificial intelligence, singularity, hybrid news, nor should you even try. I encapsulate it, but it's a never-ending depth of despair if you try and understand it. But if you understand that Jesus said that he's with us even unto the end of the age, that he gives us power to tread on serpents and scorpions, which, by the way, aren't friendly, and they're in the book of Revelation. When we're dealing about the AI, people call it artificial intelligence. I call it Antichrist intelligence. When we talk about the system of the beast and the kings of the world give their power and authority unto the beast, we're seeing that already as the United Nothings come together and try and come up with a one-world government based on AI. And so what we're seeing are the words of Brent Scowcroft, the National Security Advisor, years ago, and he's just quoting, he said, by consent or by conquest, there will be a new world order. Jesus said the same thing. So what we're trying to give to people is such a working knowledge that when people ask you, what about this, what about that? And I will say this, I won't give the news away, but just as a History Channel has come to, Tom's turned them down, and I turned them down. You know that, Tom. I've turned down some other people, Ancient Aliens, etc. But I can tell you this, the people that are now taking notice of what Timothy Alberino and myself and Gen 6 are doing, they got to eventually acknowledge the fact that they've painted themselves into an intellectual corner, and the only way to deal with it is in the supernatural realm. It's not enough to say, every country in the world, every civilization in the world, every community in the world, from the jungles to the mountains, have evil spirits. But the origin, and see, this is the thing I keep talking, Doug, about to people on your show, and every time I get a chance, it's not enough to understand the fruit of evil, it's the root of evil. So, ladies and gentlemen, you can go on my website, but I would encourage you to get the book Terminated and also the DVD, because this DVD is unlike any other that's ever been done, and I think you'll find it mind-blowing. And again, Tom, maybe you can say it better than I can. You almost have to interpret me, okay? I speak some kind of a language, but can you put into terms for me how important it is to basically take apart the narrative of the Smithsonian that there are no giants, that they've been covering it up? I mean, how do I make that any plainer? It's not like trying to blow my own whistle, but this is like, if you will, pun intended, it's the Rosetta Stone of real history.
And Tom, before you answer that question, Steve, I'm not sure if you mentioned the exact title of the DVD. If you did, I apologize, but I just want people to know. If you go to stevequayle.com, on the right, Forbidden History Revealed, the Egyptian Presence in the Americas and the Pacific Rim, the Great Smithsonian Cover-Up. Folks, that DVD, when I showed it to my wife and when I watched it three times now. And in fact, I'm not going to tell you when, but the neighbors are going to come over and watch it with their church group because of the praise I gave it in their company. I just want to make it clear that's the DVD that Steve Quayle is referencing, and that is perhaps one of the most significant pieces of work I've ever seen. Go ahead, Mr. Horn.
Well, yeah, and by the way, who was the billionaire last week? And I was shocked. I think in the same way that Prince, the famous rocker that died of a drug overdose recently, in the same way that
you're talking about Mark Cuban, and he came to the same conclusion I did, although I couldn't tell, he didn't quote me, but he came to the same conclusion, and I think you carried a story on Skywatch that basically you better be worried about these things because they're going to destroy humanity. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah, because the bottom line was, if you read what he was saying, I said, I think more than Prince is reading Steve's stuff because he was basically following your predictions in the book Terminated, almost line by line. And bottom line was, he said he actually spoke in front of a college to a bunch of college kids, and he basically said, if you don't think this is coming, then you're crazy. It was just blunt, right? You're crazy. Yep. You're insane if you can't see this coming, because the fact is, it is coming. Now, Steve, and thank you very much, by the way, for sending me a copy of that old newspaper clipping, an American newspaper, where about capturing this giant, and then the descriptions of that thing, pretty amazing. And I don't know if that's something you're going to be talking about at the conference, but am I giving away anything to say that you're going to have some stuff on display at the conference?
No, it's known, and I've even put it up, Tom, on my website. The 13-foot giant, which was the one that the Native Americans, including in addition to Buffalo Bill Cody, spoke about, he's 13 feet tall. I put it up on my website. So, and then we got the giant skull, and I have another surprise there for people that I think will be pretty mind-blowing. So I'll keep that one secret. But when they come in, I mean, just the logistics of moving a 13-foot tall giant and getting it, it takes 4 guys, it takes a pulley system. But to put it into perspective, you and I can talk about giants on coast to coast, and you can even do artist sketches. But when you stand next to a sculptor, and this is a large 3-dimensional sculptor, that everything is anatomically sized to the correct, if you will, morphological symmetry. They know that the head is this position of the body, blah, 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 the percentage of the arms, the length of the arms, etc. And you stand next to the thing, and then you understand that in 1877 in Montgomery, Alabama, 300 individuals saw this 21-foot giant, and his mouth was triangular, his eyes were reptilian, his tusks, T-U-S-K-S, like walrus tusks. And what's interesting, Tom, about that, years ago, somebody tracked down some African pots in the jungles of, I think, maybe the Congo, and they showed these creatures that were 21 feet tall with tusks holding a full mature lion, almost similar to the Babylonian and the Sumerian stele, by its hind legs. So that's what's going to be at Branson, and I want people to understand. The point is being able to reference this, because when you quote, obviously the Septuagint, what is it, Isaiah 13, it is Isaiah 13, isn't it? Giants are coming.
Yep.
The thing is that people can't understand it. So here you have the cover-up. How can you help me here to explain to people how significant an eyewitness to the Smithsonian cover-up is, when hundreds of newspapers talked about giant skeletons, all going to the Smithsonian, and to this day they still deny it?
Well, absolutely. It's the Powell doctrine. Wesley Powell wound up in the position of doing all of the archaeological research between the Grand Canyon, the Four Corners of the United States of America, and at a time when that one article that you sent, where they're talking about capturing a living giant, at that same time, there were university professors, and it wasn't just singular professors doing independent work. These were whole teams of archaeologists that were being sent out from universities in the United States, and they were doing very careful archaeological research, and they were digging up the bones and bodies of giants that had been buried. Now, we don't know exactly why the indigenous Americans buried them under these large mounds. We don't know if it was reverence. We don't know if it was part of their religious belief system. We're not exactly sure. There's all kind of theories. You and I investigated some of those theories in the book, Unearthing the Lost World of the Cloud Eaters. And when you and I and Timothy and our whole team on both sides, from Skywatch and also Gen 6, we went to the Four Corners last year. We met with the tribal leaders. These weren't Johnny-come-latelys. These were governors of nations. This in Mahudi was literally for 20-some years the head of tribal affairs to the U.S. government. So we met with the A-list of the tribes, and even they had their own theories around why these humans of enormous structure were buried beneath these giant mounds. But in any case, in early American history, the late 1800s, the early 1900s, they were being dug up all over the U.S. And it was not uncommon to find the bones of gelatin of giant skeletons that were 9 feet tall, 10 feet tall, some of them 12 feet tall, a few of them like 18 feet tall, really. Smithsonian that we're going to have at Branson, how tall is that?
13 feet.
So 13 feet would have been one of the average skeletons. And wait until you get to Branson, and you're going to want to stand and get your picture next to it. How that will put into perspective what was being dug up all across the United States of America. So, if you read our book, Unearthing the Lost World of the Cloud Eaters, there's a whole chapter in there on the Great Smithsonian cover-up. If you don't want to do that, just go to Google and type it in, and there's large pages out there on the internet you can read that describe how the Smithsonian, under the Powell Doctrine, Wesley Powell, was sent out basically with an agenda to cover up the discovery of all these giant bones, to confiscate them, to buy them, to do whatever they had to do. Little museums were popping up in different towns around the United States with these giant bone structures, and the Smithsonian would come in. If they couldn't get the proprietors to sell them these giant skeletons, they would buy the museum, close it down, but they were spiriting away. And this isn't, by the way, just Tom Horn and Steve Quayle and conspiratists talking. Academics, both inside the indigenous American universities and so on, have written about this for some time. So what happened was, around the time that Steve Quayle and I took our teams, went to the Four Corners, through a series of circumstances I won't take time to explain, we met a man that was a former curator of an American Indian museum, and he was friends with all these people. And we asked him, is there any possibility we could get a sit-down with somebody from the Smithsonian? And I think he did try, and he actually talked to a guy that's in his 80s now that lives in New Mexico that was like almost legendary at the Smithsonian. And that guy had agreed, by the way. He agreed. We write about this in our book. He agreed that the time has come for the Smithsonian to be transparent about the remains of skeletal, very, very large humans, as he called them, that are in some of these different, what are they? They're like Indiana Jones warehouses or whatever, right?
Yes, they're warehouses, 100 yards long, 100 yards annexes off of each of it, and 4 levels deep, and that's just one of them.
And he admitted that there are literally tens of millions of artifacts of all kinds, but including the remains of giants, that are cataloged away in some of these warehouses. Now, there are political reasons why the Smithsonian wants to keep that covered up today, because if it was made known that they have these, then the tribes could sue them for possession of those bones under laws that were passed during the Bush administration to, I don't know what they call it, repatriation, whatever it is, but to take them and bury them back in their native soils. And so but that's really the smaller reason. The bigger reason, as we learned through the Powell Doctrine, as to why they don't want people to be aware of these bones, is because it contradicts the Darwinian evolutionary theory. The idea that we all started out as amoebas and crawled up out of the mud and were tiny, we were that lizard that sells insurance on TV, and eventually we went from that to something bigger and bigger and bigger, and finally we became the modern day Homo sapien. When you see giants that were anywhere from 8 or 9 feet tall to 20 feet tall or even taller, it totally contradicts that theory. The other thing it does that the Smithsonian doesn't like is not only does it dispute Darwinianism, it supports the biblical narrative, and that's the part they hate. It actually supports the history as it is contained within the Bible. There were giants in those days and also after that. So when you come to the conference in Branson, or if you buy the live streaming and you're able to view everything that's happening there, you're going to get to see literally giants on display. Now, by the way, you have a skull that is going to be there, and this is based on measurements from the conquistadors, right?
Correct. correct. And the actual measurements, because listen, when Rome conquered South America, they wanted to make sure they got every last doubloon, every last ounce of silver, or whatever measurement of silver or gold. But they were so exact in their measurements, they used a rapier, the Spanish rapier, that when they put it into the eye socket of this skull that people will see at Branson, the 42-inch rapier blade touched the back of the skull. It didn't break it. It just touched it. So the thing is, to get a feel for that, ladies and gentlemen, the giants before the flood of Noah were obviously larger than the ones after. And by the way, Tom, that act is called the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act.
There you go.
That's called the NAGPRA. No, I had to remind myself, but I've had listeners that are listening to this show tonight, I guarantee it, that have found giant skeletons in their farmland in Ohio and the different areas, Illinois, and literally had the three-letter people show up because they told the postmaster. Postmaster gets on a phone, calls the FBI. They come in, and this group was threatened with their lives, this family. You forget you ever saw it. You do not speak of it, or bad things will happen to you. And I said, were you fearful for your very life? They said, Steve, they made it clear. Yes, we were. So this is why, and there's another reason now, Tom, and I'm going to be talking about this at Branson. Lawrence Livermore National Labs just came out with a new testing on bone, not actionable DNA, but actual bone. The bone memory, we hear of muscle memory, we hear of genetic memory, but Lawrence Livermore National Lab came out with a way now and to trace back, you ready for this, based on just bones, if you will, the inherited characteristics. They can trace back the origin, if you will, or the genetic origin of this. You know what this means. You get giant bones, you can trace it back, and they're going to come up with genomes that are, pun intended, out of this world. So knowing that, they're going to try and frustrate that by all means. And that clicked for me when I read that article, and I go, now I get it. Because I didn't, number one, know the technology existed until a couple months ago, and number two, then it makes sense. Not only are they hating the narrative, the biblical narrative, not only do they want to not give up on the Darwinian evolution, but now, I wonder if this will click for people. You can track the origin of the offspring, you can actually track the origin of the giants to specific fallen angel DNA, which I am under the impression and have been told that, yes, there is already libraries of that. That's what the Human Genome Project was all about. It may have been to just map the human genome. But at the end of the day, the giants, when they were slaughtered, in the book of Enoch, bring forth the bastards and slaughter them? Now, that's in the book of Enoch. It's not talking about Washington, D.C. at this point. But the point is that...
Well, Steve, I think the last time you and I were on Hagman and Hagman, we talked about how just then different news reports had been published on I wish I could think of the name of it. It doesn't matter. But research institutes connected to the federal government who were funding a massive study through our universities. And specifically they're looking for DNA connected to gigantism. And the whole question was raised about what is their fascination with the idea of gigantism? I mean, there are trillions of diseases they could be studying. Why do they want to know what type of genetic marker ultimately leads to gigantism in humans? So it was very, very curious. But having said that, kudos to you, because getting back and finishing my statement about the Powell Doctrine and what we did when we were in the Four Corners and all of that, our museum curator, who had thought that he was going to be able to get us to sit down, and he did get one of the legendary figures from the Smithsonian, who also agreed that the time was right and we could now approach the Smithsonian. Bottom line is it didn't happen. And it didn't happen, and I'll be frank, I'll be honest with the audience. It didn't happen because they looked into me and they looked into you. And they said, no way. There ain't no way because Steve Quayle and his friend Tom Horn, if they got a sit down in which we admitted that we are in possession of these giant skeletal remains, there is no way they're not taking this into media and broadcasting it from the hilltops. So no way it's going to happen. But kudos to you, Steve, that somehow, some way, you got a former
an eyewitness to the and you know what brought him forth? Yep.
Yeah,
what brought him out? Yep. I'm sorry. Go ahead. What brought him forth was he saw the Branson conference. He heard you and me and the other speakers, and he went to the Lord. This happened 20 years ago, but his credentials were impeccable. And the bottom line is that he watched in the Smithsonian them extracting DNA from an Egyptian mummy, and they were CAT scanning them. And the guy that showed him all this stuff that was going on said, we allow specific people, here you go, with top security clearances to do this.
So he is on the DVD. So when people, they can go to my website or yours, should probably just go directly to yours, stevequayle.com. When they get your DVD, pardon me, I'm being attacked by a kamikaze fly. The Lord of the Flies evidently doesn't like our conversation.
Beelzebubite.
Yeah, Beelzebubite. Well, when they go to your website and they get that DVD, not only will they learn all of the history around the Grand Canyon, what happened there, and by the way, maybe you should even go in, Steve, to how this was transferred from Egypt, because a lot of people would be asking, how in the world would that have wound up in the Grand Canyon? So go into that in a moment, but you were able to get a guy who sit down, his credentials are impeccable, and he was able to talk to the point of what, this 80-some-year-old legendary figure from the Smithsonian and these other people admitted to us anyway, and so did the elders for the Uti and the other tribes.
The Pueblo people.
Yeah, the Pueblo people. So it's everything that they already told us anyway, but he's the first guy that is an eyewitness, and he is interviewed. You've got his face camouflaged so people can't see his face, and I think you've got his voice distorted, but he is on the video verifying that indeed everything that the Pueblo told us, everything that what's his name, the guy that was the head of the American Indian Relations.
Yeah, Cliff Mahudi, who is a Zuni elder, which, by the way, the Zuni are the ones who maintain, they're even beyond the Navajo in claiming they came from the stars. The Zuni is the most unusual tribe in the desert Southwest in basically their connection to the star people. But go ahead, Tom.
Well, anyway, that's on the video. So people need to go to stevequayle.com. They need to get the video. But keep in mind that when you get to the Branson conference, and probably by now there are no tickets left, but you can get on the waiting list. That happened last year, too. And then I think we had like 200 people that just sneaked in anyway. But in any case, if they buy the live streaming, then they'll be able to see the presentation. If they get the documentary, they can see the interview with the guy that was actually taken into one of the warehouses and what his whole testimony is, which is very persuasive.
Right, and this year too, Tom, I might add that the video production is going to be exquisite because we've got a film crew coming in to do it right. So, there'll be interviews with the different people, obviously you, myself, and I'm going to do something different this year by the grace of God, as long as my hand will write out on Thursday registration. I'll be signing books off and on because, ladies and gentlemen, this thing is so big. There's so many people now. and there's so much happening, and the arrangements, we have, obviously, Darren Geisinger has done a great job arranging this. This thing is like a well-oiled machine, and I'm telling you what, I'm blown away by the subject matter that's going to be presented, and I want people to understand something. Doug referred to it. Doug, you said it at the beginning. I don't know what it means, but I will share. I know there are people saying, well, every year you say the same thing, September, October, is the October surprise, blah, blah, blah. This year, everything changes in September, and I asked the Lord what that meant. And basically, here's what I believe he said to me. Take it to the Lord in prayer. But everything you've known as normal will no longer be. Everything you expected that would come into being, the exact opposite is going to take place. So I don't know what it all means. I don't know economic. I don't know, but I will tell you one thing. I know that I know that I know, and you pray about this, that just as with us, Tom, when we're announcing this, and you just told me something I didn't know, that Aubrey de Grey and these guys are having their own conference. When we do this stuff, and it's not by our might, it's not by our brilliance, it's not by our mistakes, but it's God's key of unlocking the next level of revelation. And I'm telling you that, ladies and gentlemen, I don't understand it all, but I know this. It is a time known unto God, a specific time in which he chooses to allow the revelation of that which has been hidden for all these years. And I think it's going to be astonishing after Branson what starts to take place in the world, especially in, the world of archaeology, true history, the cover-up, the beast system, and it's all coming in. Who would have thought that the entities from, the dateless past are orchestrating the technology of today to bring about the complete destruction of mankind, bringing us to the point that Jesus said, except he would shorten the days, there'd be no flesh left alive.
Well, so, yeah, now the Transhumanist Conference that's going to be held in Nashville with Aubrey de Grey, I think they're hoping that they'll have 300 to 400 people there. They may only have 150. Skywatch Television has already contacted them. If Derek and Sharon Gilbert can go there and interview Aubrey de Grey and some of the others. And Derek's already, by the way, this is also part of all this stuff we're giving away over at Skywatch right now. He's already interviewed some of basically the administration of the Christian Transhumanist Association. So it's not yet quite the kind of epic battle of the Titans. For the most part, Steve, your conference is the giant. You are, without doubt, you are the biggest prophecy conference in the nation. And no comparison between what's going to be happening in Branson in a month from now and what will be happening in Nashville. But having said that, despise not small beginnings. These people are dedicated, they're serious, they are on a mission, and the irony is, even though they're tiny and they don't really represent the average grassroots American, they own the U.S. military, DARPA, the think tanks that are on a mission for the transmogrification, I was going to say, of the human race. So basically, we are racing towards an epic moment in prophetic history, as far back as the beginning of time. And literally every major culture of the ancient world, and how would I know this? Because I read Genesis 6 Giants years ago, and I've been plagiarizing Steve's stuff since then. This astonishingly consistent story is told in every ancient culture of gods that descended from heaven, materialized in bodies of flesh, gave birth to giants. That story is told in Rome, Greece, before that in Egypt, Sumer. They all tell exactly the same story. This happened once before. But what happens when Jesus says, and that, Matthew 24:37, as it was in the days of Noah, that's going to happen again. And it is going to happen just before the second coming of Jesus Christ. So we are seeing right now the evolution of philosophical, ideological, but also supernatural competition that's building. And the scary part is the church is utterly asleep. And if, by the way, I'm not being critical. I was a pastor for 25 years. I don't look for ways to be critical of pastors. I'm very sympathetic of what they do. But if I'm wrong, somebody point out to me that besides Tom Horn, Steve Quayle, and the Hagman, where is this issue being championed by organized Christianity? It ain't, to use an Okie term, except at the Vatican, where they are promoting a Christian transhumanist point of view. This issue is not being dealt with. The fundamentalist quarters, the whole traditional evangelical Western whatever, community, the churches, they're not dealing with this issue at all. So we may be the giant, but by virtue of our silence, we're going to lose this war for the minds of an entire generation that are being set up right now to embrace a digital, futuristic community that's going to give birth to the Antichrist. Once again, let me say, because I don't think I even said this earlier, if people go to skywatchtv.com and they buy that gigantic giveaway, you buy one book, basically, you get $220 worth of stuff free. But when you check out, make sure you type into the comments section, otherwise this ain't going to happen. I said that twice now, Steve. It's not going to happen. Make sure you type in, I heard you on Hagman. If you do that, you're going to get the 20-hour audio set, the $35 huge audio set, where I interview all these people, experts from around the world, including former government officials and so on, and the hardback book of Enoch, in addition to everything else. Now, that's not anything that anybody else in the world knows. When you go to skywatchtv.com, you're not going to see that advertised. But buy the Gods of War collection, one book, get everything else free. Make sure you type in, I heard you on Hagman. And if you do that, all this other stuff's going to be thrown in. It's like $300 worth of stuff. And you're going to want to get Derek Gilbert's book anyway. You can't possibly even understand much of the New Testament unless you understand the research that's being done by Derek Gilbert right now. It is the most cutting-edge stuff ever, and thank God he did this based on the research that Steve Quayle did ahead of all of us. And when I said plagiarism a minute ago, Steve, that's actually true. I mean, you, sir, were there before any of us.